Think you know the clitoris? Think again. Everything you knew about the clitoris is 100% wrong. It's not just a button, it's an iceberg. And today's guest is about how to blow your mind and maybe your body with what most of us were never taught. Pimenta Citrica is a Brazilian erotic writer, sex educator, and pleasure activist in Berlin dedicated to creating transformative experiences and multimedia content that inspires people to embrace more pleasure in their lives. She combines science and autonomy to explore intimacy, eroticism, and clitoracy in ways that embolden and uplift. Welcome. I know you as Ana, but today you're Pimencitrica. I hope I got it right.
I mean, everybody kind of like, how do I pronounce that? I understand. I mean, it's a bit difficult.
All right. So, what is clitoracy and why is it so important that we talk about it?
Great question. So thanks so much for having me and for, giving a platform for us to talk about this very important subject. So clitoracy is nothing further than learning about the clitoris, the anatomy, and how to properly stimulate it and its functions in the human body and also in sexual pleasure. And I know a lot of people might be scratching their heads and be like, well, what is there to know? And there is a lot. There is a lot that we can get literate on about the clitoris.
What was the most surprising fact you learned about it?
Oof. There are so many. I mean, I've been doing research around this topic for over 8 years now. And I feel like I've learned something new, nearly every week with this work. I could say a few. One of them is that when it comes to orgasms, so the minority of people with vulvas actually orgasm from penetration alone. And that's something that I was very happy to find out because I had my own neurosis around that. Also, that the position of the clitoris in relation to your urethra, in relation to your pelvis, in relation to your vaginal canal can have a lot of impact in how you experience pleasure.
Interesting. So whereas men will think about like size matters, for us, position of the anatomy might matter, right?
I mean, does size matter? That's also another discussion, but because I mean, most of the fun part is happening right at the entrance. So that's also something that we could talk about. But the position does matter. So for instance, those who orgasm from penetration alone, it has to do usually with the ratio of distance between the urethra and the vaginal opening, which is, it's just something biological. But there are other things that play into it. For instance, so personal anecdote, a lot of my friends throughout my life are like really into being on top, so cowgirl position. And I was always kind of like, because for me it was always boring. And then I found out that actually what happens is that for me, my clitoris is, the way that it's positioned is a bit higher up in my pelvis. So what happens is for a lot of people when they are on top, they can grind the glands of their clitoris against the pelvis of the partner, and that feels really good, and that can bring them to orgasm. But for me, it doesn't reach; it's too far up, so I don't have any contact between my clitoral glands and my partner's pelvis. So it doesn't feel like much. So that's why I felt like it was kind of boring. But that's just how my anatomy is set up. And it makes sense, right? Because penises have different sizes, also the way that they are crooked or not. And that's the same thing with vulvas and clitorises, because clitorises and penises are kind of the same organ.
Right. They're from the same erectile tissue, right?
Well, they are actually from the same embryonary structure.
Oh, okay.
So basically what happens is once you are being formed as a baby in the womb, you have something that it's called the ambivert genital tubercle, which is a very long name for just a blob. And depending on if you are, XX or XY, then this blob is going to be bombarded with different hormones, and it's going to develop into either a clitoris or a penis. I guess that's another very interesting, surprising fact. So the analogous organ to the penis in the vulvic body is not the vulva, is not the vagina, it is the clitoris. And they have the exact same parts, just organized a little bit different. So if you look at the diagram, if you Google clitoris and penis, you can see very clearly because it has the erectile tissue, the same way that the shaft of the penis has, but also the glands are very similar. And inside the shaft of the penis is kind of like the two sides of the clit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is that penises and clitorises are analogous organs, and they function very similarly, and they also have different sizes and they come in different sizes and different shapes, just the same way as penises do.
So let's talk about the actual clitoris. Do you have a model or?
Yes, I
Oh,
have all the
yay.
models.
Okay, let's get an anatomy lesson here.
Okay, so let's look at it. So we have here a beautiful vulva here, and here you have the urethra and the vaginal canal. And this is what we have: the clitoral hood, so the little piece of skin that covers it. And then it looks different for every person, right? Some people have a little bit more of a hood, so the clitoral glands is a little hidden. For some other people, it's more exposed. That's completely normal. And then we have here the clitoral glands, which is usually what people call the clitoris, right? But it's actually just 1/4 of the whole thing. So we have much more inside. So this is more or less what it looks like inside. And if you look, this is more or less what a clitoris looks like. It looks like a wishbone. And here we have the glands of the clitoris. It kind of protrudes down. So it has this little curve and it goes down. And if you look at it in a microscope, it has really like the tip looks very much like a penis. And then you have here the crura that kind of anchors the clitoris inside the body. So if you think about the pelvis, kind of like sits like this inside of you, and it kind of anchors down, behind the labia majora. And then you have here the bulbs. Now the bulbs are made out of erectile tissue, and they are around the vaginal canal. This is all an area that is so there is a lot of nerve endings and there is a lot of blood vessels, so is of course very sensitive, and it's all interconnected. So when you look at the dissected clitoris, it's like very hard to carve it out from all of the tissue because it's kind of like a web, and it goes all the way down to the pelvic floor, all the way down to the anus. It's
Wow.
this whole network. And then the very interesting thing, and then I have another vulva model here, this one is squishier, is that if you look inside from this perspective and you see here the bulbs, they are around the vaginal canal. And what does that mean? It means that the clitoris erects the same way that a penis does, right? Because they are the same organs with just the parts organized a little bit differently. And so lady boners are real. Clitoral erections are real. And they're super important for the pleasure of people with vulvas because when these bulbs here, they engorge and they fill with blood, they glue to the vaginal canal. And the clitoris is the main sexual organ for people with vulvas. So that means that all this innervation, all the blood vessels that I was talking about, they are the ones that work to send all the signals of pleasure, of sensitivity to your brain, right? They're kind of like the bell. So when they glue to the vaginal canal walls, that's what makes penetration feel good because this is the main sexual organ with all the nerve endings that is going to be very tightly around the vaginal canal, and then is going to send all of these pleasure signals. And this is why a lot of the times when you haven't really had proper time to have a clitoral erection, this means that the bulbs are flaccid. They're sitting away from the vaginal walls, and penetration is not going to feel like much in that case, which is something that I've certainly experienced before, and I didn't know in technical terms what was going on inside, but basically that's it. And also how tight a vagina is also connected to how turned on someone is, right? Because if you think about how all of these bulbs that are like engorged with blood, they're squeezing around the vaginal canal, that's going to make the vaginal canal tighter. So this is also something that I tell whenever I'm doing workshops for women. Like, if you want to make her tighter, get her really turned on.
There you go. I love it. I love it. Tip number one. So what that leads me to believe is that there really is no such thing as a quote vaginal orgasm, and that every orgasm is clitoral, whether you just need vaginal penetration and don't need extra stimulation to the tip of the clitoris, or you need all of those things together. It's like just a question of how sensitive you are or how aroused you are or any of those.
Yeah, you're right on the money. Yeah, this whole vaginal orgasm myth is a whole thing that we can talk about. But when we are talking about genital orgasms, because we can have many different orgasms, right? Some people have orgasms with stimulation to their nipples, to the ears, even with no touch at all. So this can happen. But when we're talking about genital orgasms, and also some people have orgasms with cervix stimulation, which is crazy to me because I don't like it, but everybody's different. So the genital orgasms are clitoral orgasms for people that have clits. Because, like I said, even if you are stimulating from the outside, or if you are stimulating from the inside with penetration, you're still stimulating the clitoris. You're just stimulating different parts of it, right? However, the most sensitive part is the glans, meaning the visible part that is on the outside. That's the biggest concentration of nerve endings. It's over 10,000 nerve endings in two main
Just
nerves.
in that little thing?
Yes, just in that little thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So the data says that only 2% of people with vulvas masturbate by exclusively putting something inside of them. Only 4% of people with vulvas orgasm with intercourse alone, with penetration alone. And 43% of people with vulvas, they orgasm usually with a blended orgasm, which is the stimulation from penetration combined with the outside stimulation. And then 34 with exclusive stimulation to the outside part. And there are some people that have multiple ways to reach an orgasm, but this is just to show that really the majority of people with vulvas are going to need stimulation to the glands of the clitoris, so the external part. And that makes sense, right? Because it is the most sensitive part of our entire bodies. But the problem with that is that Freud created this myth of the vaginal orgasm versus the clitoral orgasm. I would love to make him come back to life to have a conversation with him about why.
Right.
But basically, what he proposed is that there is these two different kinds of orgasms, and actually the real one is the one that you have through penetration, and the orgasm that you have through stimulating the outside part is kind of like a child-like orgasm that is inferior somehow. And this has created so much neurosis and so much issues for people with vulvas. I mean, I myself was like, is there something wrong with me because it can come from penetration alone? When really the anatomy and the research shows that that's for the most of us, right? So usually what I tell people is that having sex with someone that has a clitoris without touching it, and by clitoris I mean the clitoral glands, the external part, is the same thing as having sex with someone that has a penis without touching it. You can do it. It can be fun, but you're kind of foregoing the main dish a little bit.
So how then does stimulating non-genital parts like the nipples, like the ears, like the lips even, how does that make the clitoris aroused or the whole genital area? Yeah.
Well, this is a very interesting, a very nerdy conversation, but
I
basically,
love it.
so there are two kind of control in our brains. One is saying, well, this is sex, and I like this, more of this, please. Okay. And all of these are going to contribute to kind of like sending the signals. So it's kind of like this two-way street. You send the stimulation from the body, maybe from the genitals to the brain. This feels nice, more of this, please. And then it sends back the signals. It's like, okay, we're going to be ready for penetration, for instance, right? So a lot of physiological things are going to happen. For instance, the clitoris is going to engorge, but also there's something called vaginal tenting, which basically the vaginal canal kind of up. When it's flaccid, it kind of like touches itself. It's like folded within itself, and then it goes like And it really expands in size and depth. And that also makes penetration more pleasurable, more comfortable. And also it kind of optimizes the way that the semen is going to go into the cervix. So yeah, there is a lot of things. And then when you are being stimulated in other parts of your body, and everybody is different. So we have different erogenous zones and different kinds of stimulation that work for different kinds of people. It sends signals to your brain. And then your brain, two things that were going to happen is like, okay, this is sex. So the way that you look at a sexy scene, or someone speaking in a different tone, or someone undressing, and it's like, okay, this is sex. And the other stimulus is like, I like this, more of it, or no, actually I don't like it. Right. And the way that you can find out what your brain is going to be like, yeah, actually more of this, is by trying it out. But one thing that is very important to notice is that context is king when it comes to sex, when we're talking about the brain here. So
This is for women only, or female bodied only, or in
no,
general?
for everybody.
Okay.
So what means in context varies in gender, but context is always king. So for instance, let's say that you are someone that really likes their breasts fondled, and that's something that is usually a turn on, right? But you were in a context in which you, for instance, are extremely cold, or you're extremely hungry, or you don't feel safe, or you feel like someone is breaking in, or something like that.
A baby screaming in the other room.
Yeah, exactly. Or there is extreme stress or relational problems. So that is going to override the stimulus that is usually something that works out well. So that's something to take into consideration as well. Usually, and this is a different conversation from clitoracy, but of course everything is connected, is if something is not working so well when it comes to libido and kind of getting in the mood, a lot of times it's less about creating more sexy things, but eliminating source of stress and things that actually can take away from the moment. So that's also something to look at. And it's worth, whenever you have a night, or a session with somebody, or you sleep with somebody and it feels really nice, it's worth examining also what's the context of that made it really nice, so you can possibly replicate it as well.
And I think that's sometimes why a lot of therapists will recommend, or any of us will recommend, changing the context, because sometimes the context, if you always think, oh no, I'm in the bedroom, I know that means that the baby can cry, the phone can ring, my mother can knock on the door, whatever it is, they'll say, go to a hotel, go on vacation, go somewhere else where the context is different. So you take out those things that slow it down, or as Emily Nagoski would say, those brakes on
Yes.
the intimacy. All right. So I understand now how important my clitoris is, but I have no idea like what turns me on. How do I get comfortable learning that, so that I can help my partner be better at getting me there?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a valid question, because we are sadly not taught enough about the clitoris, which is crazy, right? When we think about the education that we get in schools, like we learn about the reproductive system of trees, and we don't
And bees
learn,
and birds.
yeah,
I
about
don't know where that came from.
the main sexual organ for half of the population. It's really mind-boggling, and this is slowly changing, but really, really slowly. So most of us didn't learn how to stimulate the clitoris. And then you have all of this input by the media, that you should, that sex should look like penetration and you should come instantly. And this creates added pressure. So I think it's valid to kind of strip away some of the pressure and look at your body with curiosity, right? And think your clitoris is going to be very unique, the way that it's positioned, its shape, its size. And that means that you're going to experience pleasure in a very unique way. And there is something beautiful about that, right? So taking away that comparison of like, well, my friends orgasm this way or experience this way and I don't, there is something wrong with me. It's actually not the case, because everybody's going to experience it from a very unique lens. And then get familiar with with yourself, right? Which I know can be very intimidating and scary, especially for those who grew up with a lot of shame and guilt around masturbation, for instance. I understand because I did as well. So it's a long process of unlearning. So you can start very, very slow if it feels very intimidating by just doing kind of a meditation of like lying down and imagining your clitoris, like imagining, what color does it have, and then kind of contracting around it, trying to feel it like inside of you. And then, touching yourself, playing around with toys, which I think are a great resource that you can apply, like also the suction toys. It's not for everybody, but for a lot of people it can be really life changing, because it's the kind of stimulation that really focuses on the external part of the clit, and you can incorporate it into your partnered sex, and it can be a great asset. One of the things that it's important to notice is the way that if you are a woman, if you are someone with a vulva, the way that you come by yourself is likely going to be the way that you come with a partner. So whether it's that like only external stimulation, whether it's combined, maybe some people need like water stimulation, for instance. So it's important for you to know what works for you, because then you can transport that into partnered sex, which I know that is something scary, but thankfully there are many resources. So maybe going into some audio erotica, which is something that I always recommend, like to get in the mood, play around with toys, touch around yourself. If you have difficulties orgasming, then maybe don't put that kind of pressure. It's like, I'm going to touch myself and the task is to not orgasm. And that can be quite effective as well.
Is it okay if I ask you something rather personal that would be educational and
Yes,
you don't want
please.
okay, all right.
I'm an open book.
Okay, all right, good. All right. So I know you a little bit. We've known each other for a little while now. And as I understand, you've been with female partners and male partners, right?
Mm.
So do female partners, are they better equipped to understand how to give pleasure to a woman as a woman than a man necessarily?
I don't know if I would describe it as being better equipped. I just think that this is my experience. So, it's probably not everybody's experience. It's just a little different, the way that you approach sex in general with lesbian sex, right? With queer women, because when you are a queer person and you're like questioning and experimenting with your sexuality, and for me, I started having sex with women first. So I kind of came out on this journey as a teenager. You kind of have to think a little bit about what you like and what you want in a different way that someone that has a straight kind of coming of age experience, because heteronormativity is treated like default.
Right.
So it's kind of like a blanket, which doesn't mean by all means that like straight people all like the same things, but they are kind of made to believe that they do, right? That all straight people are kind of like the same.
All roads lead to penetration. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. When you are a queer person, you're already deviant from what the norm is. So you're going to have to figure out how you're going to signal to people that you're queer, how you're going to flirt with people, how you're going to have sex, because that's not what you see so much in movies. Especially, I mean, now it's different, but when I was a teenager, that was really not the case. And I remember going into Pornhub, looking up lesbian porn. It was like really bad lesbian porn. It was like clearly directed at the male gaze, like nothing what it looks like in real life. So you have to kind of question a little bit. And of course, there is also the fact that having a vulva makes it a little bit, you understand a little bit what the other person's equipment looks like and kind of feels like. So when you go into lesbian sex, the pace is different. The way that you approach is different. So it lasts usually longer, and I think there is more of you want to get in tune more with the person, and there is more of a space for perhaps talking about what you like, what you want. And that makes it so that lesbian sex oftentimes is more satisfying. So, and this is not only my experience, this is also research shows that like usually 80%, 86% of queer women orgasm with their partners against 66%. And I think that comes with one, knowing the anatomy a little bit, but also taking more time, listening more, just because that's the way that the configuration happens.
Right.
Not always. This is, generalization, but I see that with men. And then it was funny because I started having sex with men after I already was having sex. So I knew what I liked. I knew how to touch myself. I knew how to get myself to orgasm. So that made my life a lot easier, because if I felt like if I had started my career with men, it would have been like, I don't know, because there is kind of like a script, right? And especially in my early 20s, when you were not so experienced, the guys that I was having sex with were also not so experienced. There is a script, there is an expectation of what sex looks like. It's like you take your clothes off, you do this, and then penetration, bam, 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 So there is not a lot of space for experimentation, for trying new things, for trying different positions, different things that maybe that's how you learn what you like. I mean, I've had very good sex with men, but I will say that most of it happened a bit later in my life, that were partners that were more experienced, maybe had like long-term relationships with women before, so they had more of this space to break from the script. And I think that's the main difference, right? How much this script of what sex looks like influences in the way that you actually interact with people, which is a shame. I think it's, yeah.
Well, let's close that pleasure gap from 66 to 86, whatever that 20% is. Let's give some tips to men to help them be as good lovers for women as women are for women.
Yes. So the first tip is break the script. So sadly, and I am sorry for the men, nearly everything that you've learned about sex was a lie. The idea that,
But now we're going to give you the truth. So that's the most important thing. We're going to have
exactly.
the truth in hand.
The idea that you have to have a huge penis that has to be hard, and then you have to pump away, for 20 minutes plus, and it's all about performance and it's all on you. That is all a lie. And it's sad that you've been told this lie, but it's also liberating, right? Because it means that the burden is not on all of these things. And your capacity of being a good lover doesn't depend on things that are outside of your control, of like how big your penis is, or for how long you can stay hard, or how long you can prolong your orgasm and things like that. So actually, what is going to matter is context. So do pay attention to context. For female body people, feelings of safety matter a lot for how much they can enjoy. So that's even before you touch somebody, right? And feelings of safety is not only, I'm in the relationship, in the monogamous relationship, and that's what makes me feel safe. We're talking like, for a lot of us, a lot of the times, like taking your clothes off, you're a little bit insecure about your body. So just hearing you look really hot, or, you smell fantastic when someone is going down on you, that's already going to make such a difference, that kind of reassurance into relaxing and providing that safety. Asking, right? Because everybody is different. So the example that I gave of my clitoris being a bit higher up, and that means that when I'm on top, it's not as enjoyable. If something worked really well for your ex, it doesn't mean that it's going to work for the next person. So asking, what do you like? What does having a good time feel like for you is actually the sexiest thing that you can do for someone in bed. And actually listening and having the idea that sex is not something that you do to somebody, but with somebody. So it's a collaborative effort. I think that change in mindset can be really, really powerful as well. And then when it comes to the act in itself, I would say the easiest way is making her come first, because on average, men take 6 minutes to orgasm once penetration happens. So it's really not that long, right? Especially if you think of expectations of mainstream porn, it's like you're going to pump away for 20 minutes. That's just not realistic. But at the same time, for people with vulvas to have the vaginal tenting to be ready for penetration, it takes over 13 minutes. Usually. So there's a discrepancy there, right? So if you make her come first, then you can enjoy penetration without thinking, oh my God, I have to pump for so long. So focus first on giving her an orgasm, and how she's going to orgasm is how she orgasms by herself. So ask her, how do you touch yourself? How does it feel good? And then there are some ways that you can actually stimulate the clitoris that I can show. But these are just tips. These work for some people. These are tools for the toolbox. There is no magic solution. You're going to have to talk to the person. But some things that you can do, you can go around the labia, because imagine that the bulbs of the clit are right behind, so it's very sensitive, right? So you can go around the labia here. Something else that you can do, so with the glands of the clitoris, you can go horizontal, you can go vertical, you can go in circles. Some people like some light tapping, but be careful with it because it depends on how sensitive you are. Something else that you can do that can feel really good for some people is the kind of like pulling the hood back and forth, kind of like jerking off the glands of the clitoris. And then you can also stimulate the clitoris from the inside. So you can go inside here, just at the very tip of the vaginal canal, and then press to the sides, because that's where the bulbs are. So you can press like this, you can go like this, and that can feel really good as well. And when it comes to oral sex, the same, like go slow, stay consistent if some stimulation is working out well, as much as it's possible, because sometimes, jaw gets tired. Yeah, I mean, it's just a fact.
It's so frustrating. You're like, oh, it's working, it's working, it's working. And then they move and you're like, oh,
And then you're like,
kidding. It was just there.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I heard someone say that is so true. When someone says like, just like that, or that's good, it doesn't mean faster.
Right.
It
That's
doesn't mean
right.
harder.
Yes.
It just means do exactly that.
Don't stop.
Yeah, exactly. And then
don't stop and don't change.
And don't change. Yeah, consistency is key. And know also that for the majority, so I think the statistics are crazy. I think 98% or 97% of people with vulvas, they need 20 minutes and over of direct stimulation to the clitoris to have an orgasm. So this is how long you should kind of like plan to play with the clitoris. It doesn't mean it's going to take 20 minutes, but for most of us, if you have consistent stimulation for 20 minutes, then you're going to have an orgasm. Now, this is not to say that having an orgasm is the only indicative of having good sex or having a good time, or even sometimes you can have an orgasm and the sex can be kind of mess. So, but it's a good aim, right, to have if we're looking to close that orgasm gap.
And I think that takes the pressure off of women too, because we're, I know with me, like if it's taking too long, I start getting in my head and feeling like, oh, he must be tired, or he must not be enjoying this, or and because if I know in advance, like this is going to be a long
You're in for the long haul.
You're in for the long haul. You're more patient with yourself, and you're not feeling such shame that things aren't working properly. And
that's the worst thing. And this is for everybody, regardless if you have a vulva or a penis. Like the pressure to come is gonna make you not come. Like if you're in the like, oh, it's taking too long, like chances are it's just not going to happen. So really, and that comes with the safety and reassurance as well, right? Like it's, if you were like, oh, this is so hot, I'm going to do it for you as long as it takes, just that can already lift so much of the pressure that exists in your mind.
And I think it's also working on yourself. I mean, I've had male partners who have had a lot of issues with having orgasms, like more than it surprised me. And I think it was a lot of times there's this religious shame, I think, that goes with divorce too, where these men are now having new partners. And I think this is my theory. I don't know this for a fact. I'm not a therapist, but I think that has a lot to do with it too, that they have their own guilt, but it's a different guilt. So we all have to do our work.
Yeah. And also the pressure to have an erection, for instance, is something that is very well known to kill erections. Pressure to do it's usually not a good thing. I mean, of course, there are certain kinks that add pressure and that can be a turn on for some people. But in general, pressure is not a good act to add to the mix. It's not, for the most part, going to facilitate more pleasure.
These are great tips. I love it. I've learned something here, and I thought I'd almost heard everything by this point. One of the things that though I feel is the hardest. And even as a sex educator, I still struggle with this a bit, is actually starting the conversation that is uncomfortable to begin with. Because once the conversation gets started, I know like with my ex-boyfriend, I was in a committed relationship, we would talk all the time. And sometimes it would just be like in the car because we do like our debrief in the car because that way we're not looking at each other. But I'm in a new relationship. I meet, a partner, and it's not typical for us as a heterosexual couple to have these conversations. How do I get it started so that we're both comfortable and not feeling so embarrassed or knowing there is going to be embarrassment? Like what would be a good tip to initiate it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, what are we talking about here? Like feedback or wanting to try something specifically, having a fantasy that you'd like to try? Because I think these are different conversations to have, right? If you're going to have a conversation, it's like, actually, that you did, I didn't like it so much, which is a difficult conversation to have, but you should be absolutely having it. Or if, oh, I would actually like to try something kinky and I've never done it. If you're going to give feedback, I mean, I think it's such a skill, a good skill to build, to have this kind of communication channel open. So it's one of the best things that you can do for your sex life, but it is difficult. And it's something that it's kind of like a lifelong commitment. Is every time that you add a new partner or you meet someone that is going to have to start again. But I would say, give feedback sandwiches, in the sense that say something nice and then give, oh, but that didn't work so well for me, and then say something nice, because rejection around sexuality can really feel very personal and trigger so many insecurities for all of us. And always try to frame it as with I statements. So it's like, for instance, with something that I've noticed with the position of my clitoris. So tell partners, actually, that doesn't work for me because it just, the way that my body is set up. But what could work is this. And try to involve the partner as much as possible. I feel like, especially with straight men, they are under so much pressure to perform when it comes to sexuality, that if they're giving feedback, they feel like they failed somehow. Right. And kind of involving them and getting them to feel like it's a joint effort can really be helpful in that sense. Now, if you have a specific fantasy that you'd like to try, and it's kind of like, oh, how do I bring this up? One tip that I give people is search out an erotic story or maybe an article about said fantasy, and then send it to them like, oh, I saw this. Like, what do you think? It's interesting. Because then it can be a conversation starter, but without, pulling the pressure of like you having to open, and then you kind of gauge their reaction a little bit, and then you can start like, what do you think about it? Like, would you try? And that could be interesting. Yeah, and stories are also great, because a lot of the times when it comes to fantasies, you're trying to have a specific feeling out of it. And then if you send a story that can kind of communicate that, an erotic story, it makes it easier for your partner to kind of understand what is the sensation or the satisfaction that you were searching out of a specific experience. Yeah, I would say these two are my to-go tips.
Great. And I think they also come down to feeling safe with the person. And so if you feel safe, then having these conversations and making these suggestions, although uncomfortable, will be probably a little bit easier.
Yeah, safety is something that is co-created. Mm-hmm. And so it's not a given. It's you create together with a person. And in my experience, the more candid and honest you are about your own, ideas, or even the things that maybe you were a little bit ashamed, then you create the safe space for the other person to also bring the things that they're scared of, the things that are maybe ashamed, because they feel like it's a judgment-free zone, right? Not everybody's going to be ready to have that conversation, sadly.
Yeah.
And that's something that we cannot, it's beyond our control, so to speak, but you can try to create this safety.
And it depends on what you're looking for in this particular intimate encounter with the person. And maybe that's not that important. Wow, this has been incredible. I feel like we've covered a ton. Ana, where can people find you if they want some more information or to bring you in as a speaker? This was such great information.
Yes, bring me to, I love talking about it. I love preaching the clitoracy. So they can find me on Instagram. I create a lot of content around sex education and these kind of topics, but they can also find me on my website. That's pimentacitrica.com. And then they can find more about like workshops, how they can bring me to events. I do events online as well. So yeah, there are some resources as well. There's, for instance, a material of 28 questions to have a better sex life that you can do with your partner, and it's free to download.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Definitely. That's great. That's great. Thank you so much. I know it's late at night for you, so I really, really appreciate your taking the time. And hopefully I'll see you in person sometime soon.
Yes, thank you for having me.